Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Babson. I'm Katherine Craven. I'm the Chief Administrative and Financial Officer for Babson College, and more importantly, the parent of Delia Krasansky, class of 2022 at Babson College. So, I have the pleasure today of introducing Babson President Steve Spinelli and Mayor Martin J. Walsh. But first, I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of the entire Babson community to thank Mayor Walsh for all of his help in making this centennial celebration of Babson Connect Worldwide such a success. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The mayor personally intervened to ensure that we could get the tent on the Copley Plaza Park, which is the first time it's ever been used for anything other than the Boston Marathon, so that is pretty good. Thank you. And he's also been a partner for ours in Babson, Boston, where he helped cut the ribbon on the new campus at 100 High Street in the financial district in Boston as well. So without further ado, Mayor Martin J. Walsh is the 54th mayor of the city of Boston, elected in 2013 after serving 16 years as a state representative in the Massachusetts State House from the Dorchester section of the city of Boston. Mayor Walsh has championed entrepreneurial thought and action in his management of the city of Boston. Some of the best accolades include being ranked #1 in the country for startups, and the best city in the world in which to find a job. Over the past several years, Boston has grown at a rate of roughly $5 billion in development and 20,000 new jobs each year. 40,000 small businesses call Boston home, and it's the only city on the East Coast where every resident has a park within a 10-minute walk. Mayor Walsh's emphasis on economic development and attention to our neighborhoods has resulted in spreading the entrepreneurial mindset across the city. There's a public entrepreneurship center and makerspace in my father's neighborhood in Dudley Square, which is in Roxbury, and the Winthrop Square skyscraper will have a dedicated public space for makerspace and entrepreneurial actions in this brand new multi-$100 million building in downtown Boston. Babson's also working with the Walsh administration to develop an entrepreneurship high school program, thanks to Cheryl Kaiser, at my alma mater, Boston Latin School, and also thanks to Cheryl to implement the Toyota Mobility Grant, which Babson's so excited to be a partner to Toyota in. Boston's an extremely well-managed city, enjoying a AAA bond rating, which is very rare among major urban areas. Mayor Walsh is passionate about his citizens, and he has always championed the underdog. He is a man of great character and a resilient and relentless person, having overcome a nearly fatal childhood cancer, and as a proud champion of recovery services after personally beating an addiction to alcohol. And Mayor Walsh has been a great partner and friend to Babson. I am lucky to personally be able to have called him a friend for half of my life, so thank you, Mayor. Also, Steve Spinelli, a successful entrepreneur, business founder, academic leader, and scholar. Dr. Stephen J. Spinelli, Jr., PhD, MBA class of '92, came home in our centennial year in July 2019 to lead Babson College as our 14th president to guide the college into its second century. Dr. Spinelli deeply exemplifies entrepreneurial thought and action. A lifelong entrepreneur in his own right, Dr. Spinelli has spent his career at the intersection of academia, business, and philanthropy. He co-founded Jiffy Lube International and was chairman and CEO of the American Oil Change Corporation, helping to pioneer the quick lube industry nationwide and turning Jiffy Lube into the nation's dominant competitor with more than 1,000 service centers. Dr. Spinelli has advised or taught many corporations on how to become more entrepreneurial and currently serves on the boards of Planet Fitness and Berwind. In 2011, Dr. Spinelli was inducted into Babson's Alumni Entrepreneurship Hall of Fame. Dr. Spinelli has been a recognized thought leader internationally in entrepreneurship for many years. He has been invited to speak and lecture at numerous conferences and universities around the world, including Georgetown and Villanova, Ulster University in Northern Ireland, and the Brazil Symposium for Entrepreneurship Educators. He has authored numerous business cases, book chapters, and co-authored many books, including Disrupt Together, Business Plans That Work, Never Bet the Farm, and How to Raise Capital. In terms of action, Dr. Spinelli spent 14 years as a member of the college's faculty, and we're pleased to have him back. He was the Vice Provost for Entrepreneurship and Global Management and Director of the Blank Center. In 2007, Dr. Spinelli became the president of Philadelphia University, which he later merged with Thomas Jefferson University to form the New Jefferson. He established, as president of Philadelphia University, innovative and transdisciplinary colleges such as the Canbar College of Design and the Master of Science in Sustainable Design, an award-winning transdisciplinary collaborative degree program that is among the most recognized sustainable design graduate degrees in the country. Dr. Spinelli earned his PhD in economics from the Management School, Imperial College, University of London, his MBA from Babson, and his BA in economics from McDaniel College. And because I only have a couple of moments with these two, together, and I know they're not going to get to talk personally. What strikes me both about these men is that they both embody the American dream. Both Dr. Spinelli and Mayor Walsh have achieved tremendous success and have risen to the top of their chosen fields while maintaining their humility and appreciation of the small things in life. Both men lead their teams with openness and a spirit of collaboration. Both men are disruptors and never settle for the status quo. Both men grew up in families where their parents or grandparents spoke a different language at home. Whether it be the south end of Springfield or Savin Hill and Dorchester, both men are proud of their blue-collar roots and cherish their families. And I will end by challenging Mayor Walsh to address one glaring difference in your curricula vitae, which is Dr. Spinelli, having received an honorary doctorate from the University of Ulster in Ireland, is wondering when you have a plan to receive an honorary degree from an Italian university. We'll have to work on that. Ladies and gentlemen, please, Mr. Mayor and Mr. President.
I particularly like the humility part of that.
I wish I found a Jiffy Lube. I'd be in a different line of work right now.
Thank you. You know, my good friend, the seventh president of Babson College, Bud Sorensen, which I'm the 14th, which makes him twice as old as me. I think that's probably the way it works. He once said to me, you have to be, you're going to be the president, but really what you are is the mayor of Babson, which is an interesting statement. It makes me wonder, as I think through sort of different roles that we all play in our lives, mayors in a lot of ways may be the entrepreneurs of the political systems. Do you agree, disagree? How do you react to that?
I agree with that. I think that, you know, when I was a state representative, a legislator, I thought everything started and ended at the State House. And then when I became the mayor, I realized that everything really happens at a city level, municipal level. And when you think about what's happened in the world in the last couple of years or what's happened in the world over the decades, a lot of policy and what happens in a city really can come out of City Hall in a positive manner. I view myself kind of as a CEO. In the time I've been mayor since 2014, you know, I kind of look at the business model and I think about companies and the way that you're trying to attract talent and how you're growing and you're in a competitive world. And I start looking at Boston and cities in America, we're actually in a competition with each other. We're in a competition for talent, we're in a competition for companies, we're in a competition for revenue and tax revenue and all of that stuff. So you have to have an entrepreneurial spirit. And unfortunately, you have to be able to take credit, I guess, or want credit when good things happen. And when something goes wrong, you get the blame. And being a leader of a city, that's okay. But as long as you have the right people in place and you're able to have a policy and plans moving forward.
Well, Babson knows a little bit about what it means to be number one in a field, and we're very proud of that. Boston in 2016 was ranked the #1 city, the #1 municipality for fostering an entrepreneurial environment. First of all, what is an ecosystem, and what is the role of government in promulgating that ecosystem?
Let me just quickly give you a snapshot of where I think Boston was in 2014.
Yeah, great.
When I got elected mayor, some venture capitalists wanted to sit down and have a dinner, and they had a dinner and we're sitting at a table and we were talking about the venture capital world. And they were talking about venture capital money raised here in Boston would get spent on companies or put into companies. Oftentimes, some of those companies would stay in Boston, some of those companies would go to Silicon Valley or New York or other places, but there was no requirement to invest here in the city, but they were going to where the talent was. They talked to me at that point about Silicon Valley, the investments in Silicon Valley, generally stayed in Silicon Valley. So I started to talk about who we are as a city, and I started to look and see what do we have to do differently. And one of the things we had to do differently, I thought, was to get investments that are from our city in our city, and how do we make sure companies that Boston is an option. That ecosystem, I think, is education, is millennials, is talent. We have companies, you're gonna hear Wayfair in a few minutes. I mean, that's kind of one of the companies I look to, and I'm like, here's a company that's in Boston, they're growing in Boston, their headquarters in Boston. How do we make sure that we get other companies like Wayfair? You look at Liberty Mutual in a different industry, financial services, their headquarters here in Boston, and they were able to stay in Boston. But I saw all these startups, companies coming, and they were looking at Boston, they were looking at New York, and that ecosystem is a way for us to recruit talent to actually come to the city of Boston. Then we started looking at our permitting process, we started looking at the way we do things, and we opened up government. And I think we opened up government to a point where we welcomed everyone in. It didn't matter where you stand, who you were, what you were doing, but if you were interested in growing your company, Boston is a place I wanted to happen. Right now in Boston, our population, 23% of the young people the people live in our city are millennials. So we are a millennial city. If you look percentage-wise, we're probably the number 1 and number 2 in the country is millennial-wise. When you look at venture capital spending, last year we were on pace, I don't know if we're there yet, to actually beat out New York City on venture capital spending. So we're changing that narrative. When you think about, numbers matter and where you rank in the world matters. I think an ecosystem also includes housing. And making sure that people have places to live and not being so insular that it's just Boston. Maybe look at greater Boston, because when you think about Boston, you have to take into account Cambridge and Chelsea and the cities around there. That hasn't always been the case. And I think it's very important for us to be successful. Just like Babson recruiting the best, the brightest and most talented, Boston, we want to do the same.
What should the relationship be between the city and the education community? Both individual colleges and or the whole education ecosystem?
It should be like a glove. It should be like a glove, because what happens in universities, people, depending on what area you want to talk about, but when you think about talent and creating talent, Babson College, use Babson. I'm not sure the percentage of students that get educated at Babson's business school stay in the city of Boston. Let's assume, I'm just throwing a number out there, hypothetically, let's say it's 20%. That means 80% of the talent that's being educated, that's the best and brightest, is not investing and not staying in the city of Boston, which means we lose that talent. How do we keep that talent here? We keep that talent here by having companies or having ideas that keep people here. I think that's so important. I also think it's important for us to learn from college universities. You have institutions. You heard a little bit about, at some point somebody's going to come up here and talk about the economy and where the economy is going to go. And since I've been mayor, we've been talking about a downturn in the economy. But having that relationship, when I say I haven't been talking about it, people have been talking about it. I don't see it. There's no downturn in Boston. If you want to invest there, come here. But having that relationship and using, it's not just simply an institution, Babson, educating kids. It's a partnership. When you open the office or the school in Boston, that's a big step for Boston. It might have been a big step for Babson, but it's also a big step for Boston because we get bragging rights. And I think that's so important to be able to say that we have all these great institutions of higher learning in our city. And I think that's again, that adds to, I think, the allure of Boston. Why Boston? Institutions, great companies, great philanthropic community, well-run city. Katherine talked about AAA bond rating. People don't often take into account, but when you look at Boston, for the first time ever, we have 6 consecutive years of AAA bond rating, and by the year 2025, we're going to have a fully funded pension obligation. Not many cities in America, they have other challenges, and we're able to address our challenges, and there's a whole host of other things I can talk about.
That's fantastic. The entrepreneurial process and the discipline around the entrepreneurial process and how to teach that is really at the forefront of how Babson built its reputation. We began the first entrepreneurship course in the late 60s, and Roger Babson talked about it literally 100 years ago. See, we have expanded that kind of academic discipline to include a broader tent, to think about entrepreneurial leaders and the way you might apply entrepreneurship across a whole array of different kinds of enterprises. Mm-hmm. Is there a role for the entrepreneurial leader in government?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. And I think that leader, first of all, before they become a leader, could take a career in government, to learn in government and go from government into leadership in the business world, in the business community. I think that's something that I try to look at. When I think of talent, I was asked back in 2013, before I was even elected, what do you want your legacy to be? And I said, well, I'm not really focused on my legacy. I want to get elected. And they say, yeah, but if you could look into it, what would your legacy be? And I said, honestly, I want my legacy to be that I produced the most talented workforce ever, meaning that the people that worked for me, whether they came in at 27 and then went to the next sector, are successful in life, that are running corporations and presidents of institutions and in public office. And I think that entrepreneurial spirit is important to have in government. I think if you have government employees, if you take students that are being educated in Babson, and some of those have an opportunity to come to work in the city or the state, and their goal is really to be entrepreneurial, but they get that understanding of what it is to be a public servant, a true public servant. I actually, in some ways, would argue it rounds out their education. That they're not just learning in the books in the classroom, they're actually getting real life experience on the ground, whatever it is they're doing. And I think it's so important. And I think there definitely is a nexus. For somebody who's not willing to come into government or doesn't want to come into government, there absolutely is a connection there. Because when I think about government, yeah, there's 18,000 employees, but oftentimes it's the people that are outside that have the best and brightest ideas, and they're able to come in and work with us on a whole host of different issues. Solving the homeless problem, that's not going to be solved by 10 people in a room for City Hall. It's going to take partnerships. You need those.
We have spent a lot of time and effort at Babson, and it seems in the city, Katherine mentioned the creation of some makerspace or an innovation center in Roxbury. We have the Wiseman Foundry, a makerspace on the Babson campus in conjunction with Olin College of Engineering. What is your thinking, what is the government's thinking about those new kinds of spaces, and does the government have a role in creating space for innovation to occur?
The answer is yes. We definitely have a role. The space that Katherine was talking about, the Bolin building in Roxbury, the building was being built in 2014. I became the mayor, and I think one of the first events I went to was Mass Challenge. They had the grants award ceremony, and then I went around and had a chance to talk to the people working at Mass Challenge, and I was like, wow, these kids are really talented, and I'm looking around like they're all gonna be something in life. And then I had a chance to go break ground at WeWork and Makerspace, and I was in South Boston in the Leather District, or 4 Point Channel area. And I said to myself, wow, these young people are inspiring, like the ideas they're trying to just come up with something that's gonna be, make them successful and rich. And I came back to the office and I said to my chief of staff at the time, Dan Coe, I said, we should open a space in the Bolin building. We have space in there, and we should create something innovative so kids from Roxbury and Dorchester and Mattapan that might not understand how to get to WeWork or Mass Challenge or not connected, that they can actually come into the Bolin building and do something and create something. And that's how Venture Cafe was created. And I remember when I first did it, some elected officials, if you go back and look at the archives, like, this is a foolish use for the space. We should do something else. No, it's the innovative economy that so many people shout out on. And the kids in the inner city of Boston need to be part of this conversation. And anytime, and I know there's a lot of companies represented, I challenge you, go back to your office today and ask, put everyone in a room and say, how many people from Boston, how many people from outside of Boston, 89% of the room, 90% will raise their hands. How many of you went to school here? 80% will raise their hands. And the kids from Boston sometimes aren't thinking that way. We go to other places. I think we've got to do more of that in Boston, more of that innovative space here in the city of Boston.
It's interesting. I will confess to not thinking about government acting in that way. And frankly, government officials not acting in that way. I had an idea and I made them go do some special stuff. That feels very entrepreneurial. And we think about it.
We have District Hall. District Hall on the waterfront. I mean, that was created for, I think, 7-year space to do some entrepreneurial stuff in there. The lease came up the other day, and I'm like, I can't get rid of District Hall, even though the idea at the time, people are like, that's foolish. That's a bad use for that space. It's an expensive piece of land. If I got rid of District Hall today, I'd be thrown out of office. I mean, people are like, this is great. And the same for the Bolin building. We do have a role. Just like we have a role in so many different areas of government that we should be doing in innovation. I think we actually should be doing, government should be doing more in innovation today than it actually is.
Do you hear that same kind of comment from existing larger companies that say we want to help foster entrepreneurship and innovation, or do they want you to stay away?
No, I think they want to help. I don't think anyone quite understands how to do it. I think depending on the company, I mean, some people know how to do it. Again, you're talking about a lot of companies that started with a couple people in a room and they created some idea, and this idea has turned into 60 employees, and the 60 employees has turned into 600 employees, and now they're figuring it out. But I think that the responsibility is on all of us to kind of work. I mean, again, not to keep pointing out Wayfair, but using Wayfair as an example of a company that's invested not just in creating jobs and opportunities, but also creating in the philanthropic side of the city and offering a hand in anything. And having a company like that, kind of mentor other companies to connect to the city is key.
Well, I think mentioning
Or to government.
Yeah, I think mentioning Wayfair is a perfect time to invite our friends from Wayfair onto the stage. One of the proof points of an entrepreneurial city is, do they generate the kinds of businesses that Wayfair is? So it's my pleasure to invite co-founder Steve Conine and Niraj Shah onto the stage for this discussion. Please welcome our wonderful friends. You know, we hear the stories often, and we love telling stories as a part of the educational process at Babson. It is bringing people and processes and ethos together. If you have an idea and you have a purpose-driven leadership, then a culture develops out of that. What is so interesting in 2019 are the kinds of stories that Wayfair are, where it isn't a 20-year story, it's a rocket ship. Or it probably feels like a 100-year story for you. You probably feel 100 years old. But it was 2002 that they started as an internet business. I'll get these at least directionally correct. It says here you have $8 billion in net revenue. I'm thinking that's probably not the bottom line, or I made a big mistake not investing, but $8 billion in revenue, 14,500 employees, 4,000 in Massachusetts. Tell us about that. Tell us your story, and tell us about Boston and your involvement in the community.
Yeah. Well, you have most of those facts, right? We probably have more like 6,000 people in Massachusetts today.
Approaching 7, yeah.
And in Boston, by the end of this, it'll be 8,000. By the end of this,
yeah, I mean, every Monday I do the new hiring orientations, and it's usually 100 or so people we bring in on Mondays. Niraj and I, we started as entrepreneurs in '95. Had started 2 businesses prior to Wayfair, and started Wayfair in Boston in 2002. All the businesses we've started, we did in the Boston ecosystem, in the Boston area, and yeah, it's been surreal to see it go from the 2 of us in a little apartment
why Boston?
To meeting the mayor and having, to the mayor's credit, actually, the first time we met him was when he first took office. He actually invited us in to meet him, and you could see right away that the ecosystem in the Boston area has really evolved a lot just in the 20 years, 17 years we've been running Wayfair.
To answer your question, I think Boston's actually a very good town in which to be an entrepreneur. If you think about Boston, you have an amazing group of people, so really high degree of talent, but with all different backgrounds. Certain cities specialize in one industry or another industry. In Boston, you have leading institutions in everything from healthcare to finance to technology, and so you have this broad, diverse group of people. And generally, when you're building a business or you're an entrepreneur in a social setting or what have you, you generally need a wide variety of types of people. It's usually not like, everyone is the same. And so Boston has that. Boston has amazing educational institutions. And so the educational institutions have a lot of resource pool of their own. Boston's also, it's a really attractive town when you're trying to get people to move to it, right? Because it's a great place to raise a family. It's got resources, and yet it's very approachable. You don't need to, you don't need to commute an hour and a half if you want to work right in the middle of the city, right? You can, in fact, live right in the middle of the city. And it's, the mention during the introduction, a park, 10-minute walk in any direction, There's quite a few things about it. I think that's been no small part of why we've succeeded. We're just saying in Boston we have, approaching 7,000 people. Well, it's really an attractive place for people to want to be, and then we're able to attract really talented people so then they can do an amazing job for customers. That lets us grow our business and does become self-fulfilling. I expect over time a number of them will actually go off and start their own entrepreneurial ventures, and this creates a really positive ecosystem.
Yeah, we've absolutely seen that. I pulled up a slide deck I put together for our team that actually showed all the companies in the Boston ecosystem that were either started or have Wayfair alumni at them. And so It's been interesting, I would say, as young entrepreneurs, it felt more threatening to be part of an ecosystem that was healthy. I think as we've matured as a company, you really realize the benefit to it because it really does bring talent into the region. And talent is really what creates success in companies, and where they have options and they feel like they have an environment that supports other options or other interests they might have. It really perpetuates the environment or whatever success of all the companies involved in it much better.
Roger Babson, he was prolific. He actually wrote 52 books, I believe. Wow. It's required reading at no, it's not.
A little late.
But he could be very pithy also. So voluminous, but there's some real nuggets there. And he said, success is never forever, failure is never final. So when did you feel like this was going to work? Or have you yet?
Well,
there's always a little paranoia if you're an entrepreneur.
we're definitely optimistic about the future. So in that sense, we feel like we're just getting started. We have, the way we calculate, we have like 1.3% of the end market we're focused on. So we think there's a lot of runway. But to be honest, we started 3 businesses in Boston. The first one succeeded. The second one did not succeed. This is the third one. Huh. I guess we'd optimistically say it is succeeding. You're right. We're pretty sure of that.
You're doing all right.
But there's still a lot to do. I mean, part of being an entrepreneur is you actually you tend to look forward and you see a big opportunity, and you do enjoy the journey. And there's days where it's easy and days where it's hard, and that's part of it. But you're enjoying, kind of working with a team of people trying to accomplish something big. And of course, you enjoy the milestones along the way. But you're always looking forward. And so you're actually more focused on the forward than really even about the milestone that maybe you just hit or passed or whatever.
Yeah, what was the biggest challenge? What is, and has it evolved?
Well, the super early days, one of our biggest challenges, we started this in 2002, and the dot-com crash was sort of 2000, 2001. And so in the early days, the hardest thing was to convince suppliers to let us sell their goods online, because they had a whole bunch of internet customers had gone out of business, created a lot of disruption in the market. And so we'd go to like the High Point Furniture Market, and Steve would basically have a long list of suppliers, and he'd go and try to convince them to sell us online. And he'd just like count the number of showrooms he got thrown out of it. He's like, well, the next day I'll try to get thrown out of more, because that actually means that I probably got more yeses too, right? And then I would start working with the suppliers we did get. So I would spend my day going and visiting the ones we did get, and how can we do more business together, and this and that.
He'd nurture it, I would open
so,
it.
So that was kind of the early days. And we actually got an award at High Point. We're on stage, and there's 2,000 people in the audience. And Steve said, well, I probably have the honor of not just winning this award, but being the person who won this award and who's most been thrown out of your showrooms ever. Today, that's no longer a challenge. Today, I'd say the challenge is just, we have 14,500 people. We're still growing at a rate where we double every 2 to 3 years. It's just hard to execute really well when we're trying to do so many things in parallel, but we're winning because we are doing so many things in parallel well. So that execution risk and kind of constantly trying to make sure we're doing a good job, and where are the problems, how do we fix them before a small problem becomes a big problem. That I'd say that's our biggest challenge, and we kind of just work on it every day.
The other way I describe that to our team is to say, when it's just Niraj and I in a room together working, you have a very high sense of the efficiency of that, and how do you maintain that efficiency? I mean, entrepreneurism is great because it's always the next generation sort of goes after the incumbents, and they can move very quick and nimbly when they're small. How do you maintain that as you get larger? Something we think a lot about, hold ourselves up against, and I think it will continue to be a key ingredient to success going forward.
When you bring someone new to the company, what is the characteristic you look for most? What are you generally most pleased with, and what are you generally most concerned about?
I think one thing we do that I think is somewhat non-traditional for companies is we tend to not so much focus on someone who's done X kind of job before to bring them in for Y kind of job. We're generally just looking for people on 2 sets of criteria. One is just that we think they're incredibly talented, so intelligent, quantitative, and just that we think they have the raw materials to really succeed, and we feel confident if they do that they'll be able to ramp up on our business and the area of the role. And then the second thing we look for, equally important, is the cultural fit. So we're non-political, highly collaborative, just very driven and ambitious. And there's a whole lot of kind of cultural values that we think have been part of why we've succeeded. And we try really hard to keep the company entrepreneurial despite the scale. And we'll only hire someone if they have those 2 sets, both, kind of traits or success criteria. And when we get people who do, they tend to succeed a lot in our company. And if they whenever they don't work out, you can usually track it back to one of these kind of core criteria we're looking for, and we somehow read it wrong, you know? And we just, that kind of whole kind of driven team of people working together, all trying to help each other, that's how we're able to get the outcomes. You know?
What do you expect from the relationship with the mayor or the mayor's office or the city of Boston?
We have a great relationship. I mean, we want to build our business, but our business is part of the community. We want to help the community, and the mayor obviously is trying to build the community, and part of that is creating jobs, which obviously we can help with, but we can also do things on the nonprofit community side. And so it's a collaborative relationship, and now we know if we need a tent, we know who to call as well.
You probably sell tents.
Yeah, it is. I mean, role of government. You know, we are extremely lucky to be in this country and have, you know, a very strong rule of law and have the environment where you can, you know, become entrepreneurs and, you know, single generation, become very successful. And you know, I think government and certainly local government plays a really big role in that, and creating that society where, you know, people feel, you know, they have whatever safe space, and they have, you know, the support of the community that they can go after things.
Let me end with this question for the two of you and for the mayor. In 10 years, when you have stopped being mayor and when you're still growing.
Whoa, wait a second. The last guy went for 20, so I still got, I got 14 more years left.
In 15 years, when you're no longer mayor, what's the longest serving mayor?
20 years.
All right, when you're 21 years old or whatever, you know, when we finally call you old instead of this young, vigorous guy, like they call me, how are they going to give me one word that they will describe Boston, that will describe Boston? And I would ask the two of you for one word in 14 years, how you would describe Wayfair.
I think in 10 or 20 years from now, the word for Boston is going to have to be innovative. We just could continue to have to be innovative.
Green and growing or ripe and rotting?
Just always evolving and changing and being innovative. Just stay on top of that. I don't think Boston's done that consistently. I think we had a period in the 50s we did it. And I think we might have had a period in the 60s, and then for a long time we went stale. And I think we have to be innovative if we want to continue the growth. You know, we're not growing as quickly as Wayfair, but in the last 5 years in Boston, 50,000 people living in the city of Boston and 120,000 new jobs in the city of Boston. That's just the last 5 years. We have to remain innovative.
Fantastic. Gentlemen?
I'm just glad you're sitting between me. It seems like you need to.
So my answer, you know, so it's interesting. I was going to use the same words for Boston and for Wayfair. You know, innovative is a good one. Vibrant was another one that came to mind. You know, ambitious was a third one that came to mind. But to me, they're all the same concept. Different words, same concept.
Dynamic.
But I do think if you rest on your laurels and you take it easy, that's basically the beginning of the end. It's a declining thing. I think this yearning for the future and just thinking of yourself as a startup and everything's ahead of you is important regardless of the scale you're at. And I think it's true for a city, but it's true for a company as well.
So then I would share that. I would probably say catalyst is an interesting word to me. I think if 15 years out, I think you can see companies like Wayfair become real catalysts for entrepreneurism and just, you know, we develop so many people in our organization and we have such a great team, and it is going to be very exciting to see what they're all doing 10, 15 years from now. And I think that I hope that we will be described as a company that really had an impact in creating, you know, success and you know, positive whatever outcomes in a lot of people's careers.
Gentlemen, thank you for being part of the Babson family. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, gentlemen, thank you.